Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all again. We're doing a quick sound check. Let me know that you can hear me, okay? The second this starts coming through, I'm looking at the chat over here. Tom, good morning. Andrew, Mike, my goodness, Mike's hitting us with questions already, my goodness. We'll deal with those later. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. It is a gloomy Wednesday outside. We're going to get lots of rain, so much for the wonderful weather we've had this week, but we hope you're doing all well. We're reaching you here from the BoundaryWise home office, and I have Jess on the feed with me, my associate Jess, my colleague Jess, who's managing the whole feed and everything else. Stella, thank you for the sound check there. Fantastic. Okay, so through the wonders of technology here, we're going to go through a really interesting topic today. It's going to take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, at the end of which I really hope that you leave with something of value here that can help you in your day-to-day dealings with your clients, both on the listing side and the buying side. What we're going to talk about today is a snippet of what you'd learn in the BoundaryWise Academy. We want you to come over. We want you to enroll. We want you to graduate from it, and we want you to get the CBW professional designation, Certified BoundaryWise. But listen, we know times are tough right now. Times are difficult, at least uncertain. So those of you who can jump onto it right now, this is like investing in the stock market right now. You're going to get a huge upswing as things get back to normal. So those of you who are able to, come on in, sign up. We're going to send you an email with more information on the Academy after this session. Listen, those of you who can't, I get it. There's uncertainty, there's risk. You're not sure if you can. We're going to send you some amazing offers. If you can, great. If you can't, take advantage of these free sessions, learn something, and when it's all over, when the COVID business is all over and business is back to somehow normal, then of course we'd welcome you in at that point in time. So it's there for you at boundarywise.ca, and let's have a look at some slides here. So I'm going to turn my screen off here, and we're going to head over to this first slide. So this is the one question. This is the first question that I really want to address with you today. And is this: where is the boundary, and how do I use a survey plan to find it? So there's a lot implied in this. There's a lot that we imply in all of this, and that is that the main thing is that as a realtor, as a professional as a real estate professional, do I have any sort of authority? Is it my place to be starting to look into boundaries? And we at the BoundaryWise Academy, and of course, Protect Your Boundaries, we are firm believers that nobody can provide the kind of value to a selling client or a buying client as it pertains to the land they're either selling or buying as you. And the reason is that you are you hold that relationship with them, and you are part of that relationship early on through the looking and the bidding process. You know exactly what it is that they need, and you are able to not only find them the house that they want with the square footage and the rooms and the finishes and the yard and the curb appeal and everything else, but you also have the ability to make sure that the land they're purchasing on the buying side, that the land they're purchasing is actually for sale, that they're not somehow purchasing something that's got boundary issues, easement issues, that kind of thing. And on the listing side, you can make sure that your client is going to sell a piece of property, sell their property, and not have to face the risk of trailing liabilities after the fact as a result of maybe listing something that wasn't quite the way it is if you'd looked into boundary and easement potential issues. So we always say, get a survey. Get a survey. It's not feasible to get a brand new one done every single time. That's $2,000-$3,000, and it takes several weeks. In our market, it just doesn't work that way. But if you come to Protect Your Boundaries and other sources, there are existing survey plans that you can use. And one key way that you can use that existing survey plan is to determine where the boundary is. And that's exactly what we're going to go through today. But I do want to give you a very important disclaimer here. And I know you know this already, but I have to say it just to drive the point home. And that is, you have to recognize that anything you do with a survey plan is just, you're just looking for suspicions. You're just looking to see if you suspect any issues. And at that point, make a determination with your client as to whether or not you need to bring in experts to help either validate or discard those suspicions that you have. So it's so important that you realize that, and please know that only surveyors in Ontario, only Ontario land surveyors have the legal right to offer you an opinion on where the boundary is. only surveyors, not architects, not engineers, not lawyers, no one else. It's just surveyors. So we're going to go through this process, and I'm going to show you how to determine where the boundary is. But before you go making any decisions on this kind of information, before you go making commitments to your client, please make sure that you understand that any opinion, however accurate it is that you create, it doesn't count, and it's dangerous to actually go forward with. This is more about triage the situation, find out, look to see if you have any suspicions, and if you do, give your local surveyor a call. Now, if you're a BoundaryWise graduate, you get that support free from us, a year's worth of free support like that, where you can call the kind of questions Mike's been asking this morning in the chat. So there are lots of resources there for you. So let's get into this. I'm going to walk you through, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is 7 survey plans. This is just going to be survey plans we're going to look at so you can see exactly how we do what we're going to do. So the first one we're going to look at, let's have a look, let's go here. We're going to look at this one here. Now, this is a fantastic survey plan. It was produced by Kirchmar surveyors. We're not going to go into all the other details that we've looked at in previous seminars in terms of validating it and making sure all the right elements are. Sorry, I lost my words there. All the right elements are on the page. You can look at previous videos to look at that stuff. Assuming this is a survey that you determine is decent to use, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look and see, you're going to determine where the boundary is. And the boundary on a survey plan is always the thick, dark line. Look for the thickest, darkest line. That's going to be your boundary. And in this particular case, you can see the boundary right here. I'm just going to trace it with my mouse. There it is, the thick, dark line along the back, down the other edge, down the other boundary here. And this is Old Young Street at the front here. This is Old Young Street. This is the front boundary. Now, don't confuse the front boundary of the property with where the road is, or the curb is, or the sidewalk is. That's not where the boundary is. And some people take measurements from the curb all the way, or the road all the way back, and say, well, hang on a second, this lot seems to be deeper than the measurements suggest. You're rarely going to know where that front boundary is without help from a surveyor. However, what we're going to do today is we're going to look into one simple thing that appears on all survey plans, and that is ties, T-I-E-S. Now, ties are the measurements, the distances on the survey plan that tell us exactly where exactly what the distance is between the foundation of the property and the boundary. So in this particular case, this is a slide off one of the BoundaryWise videos. And in this particular slide, you can see here, this is the same survey we were looking at before. Here's the boundary here, thick, dark line. Here's the boundary here, thick, dark line. And in orange, in the orange circles, what we're seeing is the ties. And those are the measurements, the distance between the foundation of the building, or that point that it's pointing to, and the boundary. Now, really important point here. You got to be careful that you make sure that you are dealing with, or you understand what unit of measurement the surveyor was using on this survey plan. There are 3 different units of measurements, and you got to make sure on the face of the plan you know which one it is, because they can have a drastic effect on your determination as to whether there's an issue or not. There is obviously imperial, feet and inches, so imperial. There's metric, meters and centimeters, and of course, there's also decimal feet, which is whole feet, and then a decimal value of the rest of the measurement, smaller than a foot. So 6.5 feet is decimal feet. It's the same as 6 feet 6 inches in imperial. Anyway, that's a different topic. Make sure you understand exactly what measurement you're looking at, what unit of measurement you're looking at, because in this particular case, you can see down here, it says 1.82. I'm looking at, thanks Nathan, you're saying that you don't see the pointer. Okay, so we're looking at the bottom left, no, let's go to the top left orange circle there, that's encircling the value 1.79. Can you see that? You see that okay? So up there where it says 1.79, what that's telling us is that the distance from the building to the boundary is 1 meter and 79 centimeters. You can see how if you misinterpreted that as being 1.79 feet, you're dealing with a much different distance, 1.7 meters versus 1.79 feet. Big difference, right? So That's telling us it's 1.79 meters. Now, where is that measurement taken from on the building? That's a really important question, right? Because what you're going to do is you're going to take that measurement, 1.79. You're going to either get your tape measure or your digital measurer, and you're going to measure out 1.79, in this case, meters. You're going to measure out 1.79 meters to determine approximately where the boundary is. And from there, you can say, wow, I just measured exactly what it says on the survey, and either the fence is in the right place, or the fence is in the right place, or there's an encroachment or something like that. So where do you take the measurement from? Vast majority of times, if it's a tie off a building, you're taking the measurement off the top, at the top of the foundation, at the top of that parging of the foundation. That's where you take the measurement from. And again, it's an approximate measurement for you. Surveyors have amazingly precise instrumentation, and they also approach any measurement from multiple sources of research. They don't just take the one measurement from one source. They look at it from a number of different places to get that accuracy. For you, you're looking for an approximation. So you're going to take your measuring tape or your digital distance finder, and you're going to measure 1.79 meters from that top left corner. And if you want, put something down. Get some small stakes, and whatever it is, even paint sticks if you want. Shove it in the ground at that point. Then you go to the back of the rear of the property where it says 1.8. Do you see that? Top right, 1.8. And you do the same thing there. You measure that out and you put a stick in the ground, like a paint stick. They work great. And then, if you can, you walk out to the front, to the front of the house, and you look down that imaginary line, assuming you can see both stakes. You look down that imaginary line, and that is approximately, based on the survey that you have, where the boundary should be. And at that point, you can ask yourself, do I see any encroachments? Do I see somebody's swimming pool encroaching over this? Do I see neighboring encroachments on the subject property? Remember, there's an issue with title insurance around that. You're just looking to see, is there anything that you need to bring up with your client here to have a discussion about? And this is just as important on the listing side, right? Because on the listing side, you want to make sure that that listing you put up and you represent, you're representing it with full disclosure of potential issues, not just all the fabulous things about the house, but any potential issues that you want to get ahead of in the listing process, that you don't leave there for a buyer who signed their agreement of purchase and sale to then come back at your seller and say, well, you didn't tell us about this material issue. We either want a reduction in price or we want to get out of the deal. Don't leave yourself with those kinds of risks in your deal. Disclose this kind of thing. So let's look at a few survey plans now. We are going to go to this one right here. Hopefully you can all see that well. So with this one right here, what's really interesting about this is it's a fairly old survey plan, right? And this one was done in several pages, scanned in several pages. Trust me when I tell you it's a good one. It's a great survey plan, even though the quality of the scan isn't particularly fantastic. But everything we need to be able to make a determination of where the boundary is right here. And on this plan, those of you who can see this clearly, on this plan, you should be able to determine why boundary due diligence and studying a survey is so important. So we're going to zoom into the back of this property, all the way at the back. And what I want you to, yes, my mouse isn't showing, is it? Yes, okay. So what we're going to show here is at the very back, you see at the back of this property, there is a building that says 1-story house number 138. Do you all see that? Now go to the rear right corner of that. So basically the back right corner, and you'll see that there's a measurement there. I'm just going to turn my video off here. There we go. You're going to see that there's a measurement there that says 1.94. It's not particularly clear, and this would be one of those surveys that you would call us on, and you would say, listen, I'm not sure about this. Is this a survey I can use? I can't quite see this. So this would be one of the ones that you would call us on, and we'd help you through that. We might be able to find a clearer version of it, that kind of thing. But this is 1.94 back there, and in this case, it is decimal feet. Sorry, it's meters. Forgive me, it's meters on this one. 1.94 meters. So you could take that measurement, and you could go to that rear corner at the top of the foundation, and you could measure 1.94 out and put a paint stick in the ground. And you'll know approximately where that boundary is. And what you're going to notice here is that the fence is further away than that. And if you look at the right-hand boundary of this particular property, So you're looking at the building where it says one-story house, number 138, and then you're seeing the boundary to the right of that, and then to the right of that, you've got a thinner line with little crosses on it. That's the fence. So what you can see here is, now obviously the boundary isn't visible to the naked eye, right? You can't see that. All you can see is the building and the fence, and you just assume, we all assume, that the fence is on the boundary. Well, we know from our research, and you've heard me say this 1,000 times, fences, 99% of fences in Ontario are not on the boundary. They're either off by a little or off by a lot. In this case, it's off, the fence is off by a lot. So in this case, the value of doing boundary due diligence, both on the listing side and the buying side, is that you will very quickly determine that the fence on the east side of this property is actually not on the boundary. In fact, it's off by quite a bit. So if you're listing, do you disclose this? I would. I certainly wouldn't leave it. On the buying side, do you want to know? Of course you do. Of course your client needs to know this, because they may have giant plans for enormous great construction projects and dreams of what they can build in the back. And they find out once they move in that in fact their boundary isn't anywhere near where the fence is. In fact, if you see the front of this property, let's go up here a little bit, you'll see that the garage at the front of this property is fully encroaching over the boundary, right? That's a real issue there. That's a real issue. The value of purchasing this $298 survey on the buying side, I mean, obviously you can't do this on every single property that your client's going to bid on, but if your client is serious about this property, this is one of those things that's an enormous amount of value. You might be able to help them negotiate a lower price. You might be able to help them avoid this property if it turns out that that just isn't okay with them, that the fence is that far off. Anyway, a great example there. Notice it's an older plan. It isn't particularly clear. We would be able to help you make everything out on it. So you've got a decent piece of boundary due diligence here. So let's go to the next one. Here's the next plan. This is a little clearer. This is a Dunning and Taylor from 1964. One small point I have to make here with you, and that is that it is so important to recognize that a survey plan is like a picture. It's like taking a Polaroid. It's a legal diagrammatic representation of the property and its structures at the time the survey was conducted. So in this case, what we know is that this was conducted, and I'm afraid the date is cut off on your view there. Let me see if I can get that date up a little bit. No, it's conducted on January the 31st, 1964. And that's just below where it says E. Taylor, where the surveyor signed it. It's cut off, I'm afraid, on your screen, but for me, I can see that. So on January the 31st of 1964, this is what the property looked like. Now, that's a long time ago. Boy, that's a little older than I am. It's as old as the hills. So the question is, has anything changed since then? And some people say, listen, if it's more than 6 months old, the survey just doesn't count. That's actually not true. If the foundation of the building has not changed, you can do a complete tear down and rebuild. But if the foundation has not changed and the boundary hasn't changed, there haven't been any changes on title to the boundary. If neither of those things have changed since 1964, this is a pretty good survey that you can use to determine where the boundary is. And we're going to zoom in here and let's have a look. We're going to zoom in here. There we go. Fantastic. We're going to zoom in here and you're going to see that on the, we've got the road, Fulham Drive on the right-hand side. And then we've got the stucco building, number 16 right there. And we're going to look at the northwest, so the top right measurement off the corner of stucco number 16. And you'll see that that measurement says 10 feet, 6 3/4 inches. That's your tie right there. You can measure that out. At the back of that side of the building, you can see that the rear, the property line is 10 feet and 11 inches from the building. And on the other side of the building, 5 feet and 1/2 inch. And at the front, and again, 5 feet and 1/2 inch. So you can measure those out, stick a paint stick in, or you might be just hitting the fence and confirming that, wow, in this case, the fence actually is on the boundary, and determine where those are. So hopefully you can see those. Again, we know that this is imperial because it's 10-11-, 10 feet, 11 inches. But again, please don't just blindly go into this and use this and say, I definitively know where the boundary is, and my God, somebody's pool is encroaching. We need to make some huge decisions around this. all you're doing is your triage, basically. And you're looking to see if you have any suspicions, do it quietly. And from there, call us if you want, or call your local surveyor who will help you out, help you determine the best course of action with this. And also, you speak with your broker, because every brokerage, every office has their own policies around disclosure and so on. In our case, we firmly believe disclose on the listing side, disclose. Guys, it's going to sell. There's no question. So just disclose to avoid any chance of trailing liabilities for your client after the fact. And on the buying side, my goodness, do your boundary due diligence, because we know that title insurance, for all the amazing things that it does and the incredible coverages that it gives, doesn't cover everything. And you're not going to know in the heat of the moment whether something that you see is covered or not. You can't just assume it's covered. That puts your client in a really awkward situation if something comes up after the fact. So let's go on to the next survey here. Here we go. So this is a plan of survey of lots 45, 46 on plan 2416 in Etobicoke. So here we go, and I'm going to zoom you in just a little bit more. Perfect. Look at that. So again, Algae Avenue. It's an interesting name, isn't it? Algae Avenue at the front, 50 feet wide and 121 feet deep. And right here you can see frame on block house. And you can see right here at the front, 3 feet 11 inches from the front, as we're facing this from Algae Avenue, from the front left corner, the jut out, 3 feet 11 inches, and at the rear corner, 3 feet 9 inches and 3/4. That gives you those measurements to figure out where the boundary is. And at the rear, in this case, you don't have measurements off, you don't have ties coming off the building to the south, boundary, but you do have a framed garage at the back that's showing you 13 feet 8 inches and 13 feet 7.5 inches. Now, again, you have to confirm, because if we look at the date on this, here we go, April 20th, 1959. Again, it's cut it off for you. That's unfortunate. April the 20th, 1959, it says there. So, and so you got to make sure that you realize that this is how it was back then. Some of this may not actually be the same way anymore. So bear that in mind. Always recognize the date of the article that you're looking at, of the survey that you're looking at. There's a great question that just came in from Peter, who says, even if you have foundation access, how do you estimate the thickness of new or repaired foundation stucco paging since the original survey? That is a fantastic question. I was going to come back to that later, but we'll deal with that right now. Peter, thank you. That's fantastic. You've got to assume that whatever you've got to try and figure out what it was back then, because the worst thing is you measure off the foundation, but the foundation has had brick added to it or some sort of thicker paging, which will change that measurement. And so in that case, you need to, well, I'd get a surveyor involved at that point. That's not as plain as simple as you're coming off the foundation, right? So it's really important that, again, I have to re-emphasize, you're only doing this to see if you have any suspicions of huge issues. You're not doing it to create a definitive opinion around the boundary. I probably said that enough, right? I should stop now. Okay, let's look at another one here. Let's get this back up again. There we go. And let's look at another one here. Okay, this one's from W.S. Gibson, Ontario Land Surveyors. And the date of this one is April 23rd, 1927. And you might say to yourself, really? An almost 100-year survey? I'm a bit of a history buff. I love this stuff. Look at this survey. It's absolutely gorgeous. And you know what? From a surveyor's perspective, from a survey firm's perspective, this kind of plan is absolute gold for us. Because unlike you, the older the survey, the more credible the information is on it. So it's almost like a title search that gets done by surveyors. They go back in time when they're producing a new survey to make sure that the chain of events and history that represents a particular property is cohesive and there aren't any contradictions to it as time has gone on. So this is an older one, and again, this looks like it's a duplex. Let me zoom in a bit for you. There we go. It's a duplex. If it's still here and the foundation's still the same as it was back then, you should be able to know. You can see here that you've got ties on the top side, 2 feet 8 1/4 inches, 2 feet 8 3/4 inches on the other side at the top. And at the bottom side, you've got 2 feet 8 3/4, 2 feet 8 1/2. Again, measure those out, stick a paint stick in, or whatever it is you want to do, and come to your conclusions and look at your suspicions, identify your suspicions. Okay. Next one, I think you're getting the idea here, right? This isn't rocket science by any means. Here's an interesting one. My goodness, this one's a much newer one that's quite complicated. And in this case, what we've got is we've got again a duplex here, semi-detached, a semi-detached 2.5-story brick dwelling. And I'm looking at the place, the piece that says Lot 8, the number 40 right here. And you'll see that just above that, you've got the thick dark line that's the boundary, and just below you've got the thick dark line that's the boundary. And the house is the rectangle that's shown with the little hash marks on the inside. So what we have here then is a situation where you've got a house with not a lot of lot around it. And so we're going to look at the bottom side here where it says Lot G. And Lot G actually sits just in between, if you notice, the building above it and the boundary just below it. It's really difficult doing this without a mouse. I have to figure this out for next week, okay? To do it descriptively. So we're looking at where it says Lot G, and you'll notice that where it says Lot H just below, that's the other side of the boundary. So you can all see the boundary there between where it says Lot G and Lot H. That thick dark line is the boundary. And just above where it says Lot G, that's the side of the building. So what it's telling us here, to the left of the L of Lot G, it's telling us that there's a gate. Can you see that? And it's also telling us that there's a tie there of 0.64 meters in this case, so 64 centimeters. Do you see that? Go left from the L, you see it says gate on a slant and then an arrow, and then it's got 0.64 meters. That's a tie there for you. What I want to show you here is the fact that if you go to the right of Lot G, it says subject to right of way as an instrument, whatever. And this is one of those, I know we're sort of jumping around here, different topics, but this is one of those situations where getting a survey plan that shows you the location of the easement is so much more valuable than looking at a written description of it. In this case, you can see that the easement butts almost right up against the houses. So between these two homes, there is an easement. They have to share rights over each other's section of that easement, and they're not allowed to block or obstruct this. Really important information for you. But you can actually get the measurements of the easement off the survey plan. We'll probably deal with that in another seminar. But what I wanted to show you here is a newer survey to show you that whether the survey was done last week or 100 years ago, the same principles apply. You don't have to learn something new for every age of surveying. The basic principles of surveying and of boundary due diligence that you can do apply throughout, regardless of the age of the survey. So, one more. Here we go. Oh, a nice easy one, right? A nice, clear and easy one. This is great when this happens. So in this case, we have a survey that was done just after the developer had finished these 5 homes. And typically what happens, is that as soon as a home is built, the surveyor has to come in and do what's called an as-built survey, which is basically saying this is what was built and now that the foundation is in. And that's the key point in time there is the second the foundation is put in, then at that point, an as-built can be done before the rest of the house is framed up. So in this case, you'll see that we've got 5 different homes, 4 going across Heritage Hills Boulevard, and the one down at the bottom on Irwin Drive. I think that's Irwin, something. Maybe I've cut something off there. But what we can see here, if we look at let's take number 5338. It's the corner lot, right? So number 5338, you can see there that the tie, let's use the proper terminology, the tie at the rear of the property between number 5338 and number 5334, the distance from the back of that building to the property line is 1.29 meters. And at the front of the building, I assume that that's the garage, at the front of the building of 5338, the distance to the property line is, can you see that? I think it says 1.29 as well. Now, what's nice about this plan is if you're buying or selling or listing this particular property, you've also got the measurements from the neighboring house to the boundary. So you can actually take 4 different measurements and put your paint sticks down if you want, if there's no fence there, obviously, and confirm where the boundary is. That's always useful. So that's a nice clear one, and I hope that it demonstrates to you A, how valuable it is to be able to actually make these kind of determinations and see, quote unquote, see where the boundary is, but also how relatively easy it is. You don't have to get overwhelmed by everything that you see on the survey plan. You can focus on a few key things. And listen, I'm not trying to make this pitchy, but if you are a graduate of the BoundaryWise Academy, one of the things you get is free unlimited support from us. That's, of course, you get support while you're taking the course, but more importantly, once you've graduated, you can hit us with any questions like this that you want. Can I use this survey plan? I can't quite read this number. Can you help me? Do you have a clearer one, a clearer version of this? What do I do in this situation or that situation? So get us involved as your sort of on your speed dial, so to speak, in case in any situation where you have a boundary, a potential boundary issue. I had an agent call me the other day, and she said, I was in a listing presentation and something came up about an easement. And I had you guys, I knew obviously a BoundaryWise agent. And this agent was able to say to the client, look, I've got protect your boundaries on the other end here as part of my professional designation. I'm going to send them a quick note and ask the question. The cool thing was that by the end of the discussion that they had of the listing presentation, we'd got back to the agent. We actually called them and had a conversation with them on the phone. We were able to answer that particular question. Really powerful stuff, right? You're competitive. You're competing against other agents. You're trying to get the listing. So enough of the pitching. This was supposed to be pure education. I hope this was valuable for you. If you have questions, fire them into the chat, and we'll do a separate video over the next few days that answers just those questions. Come over to the BoundaryWise Academy at boundarywise.ca. We'd love to see you sign up if you can. If you can't, just keep coming back week after week and enjoy these free sessions. And in the meantime, have a fantastic week. Stay healthy, stay happy, stay productive, and we'll see you all in a week's time. Take care, folks.